Brothers podcast, a Five Pillars of Mad Monolith production.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, friends, and the foes out there, and welcome to another episode of the Blood Brothers podcast with your host, Dilly Hussain. I hope you've all had a wonderful Eid, given the very unique and strange circumstances that we have found ourselves in as mankind for the last 2 to 3 months. Today's episode is a very special one, like all the other episodes have been. But today's guest is someone who's very dear to me, someone who I see as not just a friend and a brother, but also an ally in the work that we do, and that is online Muslim media. And that is Zahid Akhtar from Documenting Oppression Against Muslims, or better known as the acronym DOAM. Assalamu alaikum, Zahid.
Walaikum salam, Dilly.
How you doing, my brother?
Alhamdulillah, fine. How are you?
I'm well. Jazakumullah khair for agreeing to do the podcast.
Wa'iyakum anytime.
You say any time, but you're someone who's actually,
Very
I regard it, very hard to get, very camera shy, mashallah. So we're very honored to have you on, bro.
Alhamdulillah.
So before we kick off the crux of the podcast, I want to ask you some questions, right? They're quick fire questions. So I'm going to mention to you some media outlets, yeah? Some media outlets that are very popular amongst Muslim communities. And I want you to tell me, honestly, the first thought that comes into your mind when you think of the following media outlets, okay?
Yeah.
Is that a yes, yeah?
Yes, that's fine.
Bismillah. Okay. Ilmfeed.
All about the good stuff.
Islam 21C.
Salafi orientated.
The Muslim Vibe.
That's a good one.
Speak your mind.
Front for Shia.
Okay. The Muslim Matters.
Muslim Matters. American Islam.
One Path Network.
Our brothers from down under. Inspirational.
Okay. OGN News.
Unique.
Middle East Eye.
Don't know much about them, to be honest.
AJ Plus.
Quick.
Middle East Monitor or Memo.
Same with the Middle East. I don't know much about them.
And last but not least, Five Pillars.
Islamist.
No, that was the
I would
truth.
see 5 pillars in between ourselves and infield.
Mashallah. The exact same analysis that I have of ourselves. Mashallah. Jazakumullah khair, bro. And maybe we can touch upon some of those initial thoughts you had about the aforementioned outlets. Look, bro, let's first start by talking a bit about DOAM's work, yeah? And the fact that you have specifically named your outlet Documenting Oppression Against Muslims. Now, each media outlet, irrespective of what they truly represent, they've been accused of many things. Like in the first year of Five Pillars, we were accused of being a front for HT, we were being accused of being a front for Iran, we were being accused of being a front for Salafis. That happened for about 6 to 8 months until people realized, okay, these guys don't really have a partisan allegiance. They just cover and give platform to mainstream people from these different groups, yeah? DOAM, on the other hand, I've noticed over the years, and especially in the beginning, received accusations of being Khariji or being sympathetic to Khariji groups, always calling for rebellion and removal of rulers. And we know that that complaint has usually come from one kind of group.
Yes.
And I've seen you engage with people who have accused this. Why do you think they accuse you of this?
It's because they cannot handle that their government or people who they claim to follow are being exposed, shall we say, or anything that brings a negative, negative or criticism against who they follow blindly, basically. It's not you. Yes, we still get this today.
Okay.
Unfortunately, but it's not just. I think there are a number of groups as well, even nationalists as well, use that term against us. But it's a term that's it's almost become as a swear word in a way, as an insult, just to cast doubt on people and the work that they do and bring their work into disrepute. So the people move away from them. Initially, like you said, we had a lot of attacks like that. I don't know why, to be honest with you. It's just all we're doing is documenting. For example, let's just say in Saudi Arabia, a certain sheikh has been imprisoned. We highlight it. We get straight away. We get called you takfiri, you khariji, you ikhwani, even, and all these words. And all that is we're just reporting what has just happened.
So, when it comes to documenting oppression against Muslims, do you differentiate proportionately, or is there a case of consistency when oppression is happening against Muslims by Muslim governments and regimes as well as non-Muslims? Do you make a differentiation, or do you see it as it's oppression and it needs to be reported? Or do you see,
we see it as oppression and it needs to be reported, especially more towards the east, I say, because there's no accountability. There's no... they don't have a voice at all whatsoever, and they go, for example, if someone's been imprisoned, the family linger around for decades even.
Absolutely.
And we see it as both the same, whether it's east or the west.
So let me ask you this then, yeah? When you get accusations of being called Khariji, sympathizers of people who want to remove governments and regimes, Ikhwani, these kind of terms are generally associated to a strand of Salafis, which is widely known as the Madakhila, yeah?
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily restricted to them.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a brother that we both know called Bassam Zawadi, who says that the ideology of the Madakhila is not actually restricted to just Salafis. You can get Madkhali Sufis, yeah? And really that essentially means that someone who's blindly allied to oppressive regimes, So in that case, do you ever wonder to yourself how your content could be interpreted as anti-regime and perhaps instigating calls?
Absolutely, we get all the time. If we mention, for example, a Syrian child has been shot dead at the Turkish border, and when we highlight it, we get the nationalists coming in, start accusing you, with the usual rant about, how Turkey has saved so many refugees, etc., etc., and they can't do anything wrong. And then they start going off calling you Khariji, you're extremist, and so forth. But because I'm in the West, alhamdulillah, we're more or less free here. If I was in the East, I would have been disappeared long time ago.
Yeah, of course, we know this. We know that what the work that we both do.
Even to be honest with you, especially on Twitter, we get even Muslim governments ask Twitter to remove our tweets down, especially Pakistan.
We had that India. We had that with India recently.
And India as well, And there's another country, I think it was
China,
yes, Morocco as well. I don't know why Morocco, but because out of the social media, Twitter is obviously the better one compared to the rest of them. But it's the usual. We get it day in, day out throughout our work, and to be honest, we're so used to it that at the beginning I used to converse with them a lot more or react to them a lot more. Now I just tend to ignore them.
Okay. Obviously, when I started the podcast, I asked you to describe, or the first thought that came into your mind, and when I said ilm feed, and you said positive good news. And then when I asked you to describe 5 pillars, you said somewhere in the middle between ilm feed and DOAM, yeah? Now, obviously, you're continuously on a daily basis dealing with oppression against Muslims. And that's everything ranging from Islamophobic attacks in the West to literally Muslims of Palestine and Syria and Kashmir and elsewhere getting killed and maimed and slaughtered, yeah? How does that affect your mind? Does it not depress you out that sometimes you may want to I mean, just out of curiosity, because some people wondered, is that
It does.
yeah,
It does. I mean, you go through moments, especially the chemical attacks were happening.
yeah,
By the Assad regime in Idlib,
mm,
in Khan Sheikhoun.
Mm.
That was a tough one. I mean, yes, you go through moments where you feel a bit low, a bit down, but then I come back to it and then think, because I believe this work is needed, because it's not, we don't post everything and everything. I mean, we do positive news as well, coming out from these areas, out of oppression, to show that, something good can happen out of these, but our project is mainly targeting just on this aspect and nothing else. I mean, we do get the comments like, "Why don't you highlight, oppression against non-Muslims?" I mean, go ahead and do, by all means do that. I will support you in that. But this project is just specifically on this alone, and I think, like 5 pillars, like yourselves, we Muslims need to control the narrative, and unfortunately, many of us look at us and say, you Muslims, you cannot be trusted, and they always have this negative image
Yeah.
or perception that we're some sort of conspiracy, and we get that a lot, but it's one of those areas where I believe that we still need to, and I don't think oppression is going to disappear. It's always going to continue. The Prophet
Absolutely.
said so, and I think someone out there, even after I pass away, that hope, inshallah, this work will continue and grow.
Inshallah. Yeah, I think you make a valid point there. I think one of the discomforts that our own community, especially in the West, faces is that when they're continuously reminded about the state of the Ummah, right? Yeah. And the reason why I think it's important, it's not that we get a kick out of showing this footage or letting them know, but it's a reminder that you are part of a global Ummah.
Absolutely.
And the state of the Ummah is not good, yeah? And by all means, take your positive stories, and there are positive stories, and
Absolutely.
positive stories are supposed to be reported.
Yeah.
But if you were to scale it up proportionately, it is a fact of a matter that Muslims around the world are the most oppressed group. Our lands are occupied, people are living in adverse poverty, majority of these countries are under brutal despotic regimes, and therefore, depending on what kind of Muslim you are as well and how you see your priorities, if that's what you see as a priority, that's naturally what you're going to project to the Ummah. Would you agree?
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, look, I said this on the podcast that we did last Gregorian New Year with Salman and Saeed from Ilfi. And I said, look, brothers, it's not a case that 5 Pillars doesn't report positive news. It's a case of that we proportionately do it.
Yeah.
Because yes, there's good, but there's a lot of bad. So we need to report proportionately. Do you understand?
Absolutely.
On the issue of bringing these stories, bringing this raw footage to the Muslim audiences, DOAM's audiences, right? How has Facebook, specifically Facebook, but also YouTube, I guess, because you used to have a YouTube channel, you no longer have one, do you?
Yes. They shut you down. Shut us down twice.
And is there a reason why you've not tried your chances again?
No, there's no reasons given. There's, even when you appeal, it's just straight blanket cut off, just like that.
And would you ever consider reopening one again?
YouTube? I would do, but I think it's a strange one because, for example, if you post a normal Islamophobic hate crime that, for example, a sister's being attacked, for example, verbally, even that alone, for some reason, gets taken down by YouTube, even though that's reported by mainstream media. So you could see like AJ Plus or BBC or Sky News, whatever, they post the exact same material as we do, but for some reason ours gets taken down and theirs is still up. And I think that's deliberate because we're not controlled by anyone, and we run our own projects, and I think that hits a nerve with some people, or especially those who work in those platforms.
So, given that we've had Facebook pages, I mean, 5 Pillars have not had any pages shut, but we have been shadow banned.
Yes.
And you were the first person I always come to when we experienced this stuff. And I remember last September when we experienced our first shadow ban. Do you remember that conversation we had about WhatsApp? I was quite upset. Do you remember?
Absolutely, yes.
And we were distraught because I was like, subhanAllah, we rebranded. Our traction was getting really big of the last 6 years, and then bang, they hit you with a shadow ban. And it was to do with, we merely quoted a statement from Khadim Rizvi, a scholar from Pakistan, who basically said that there are Muslim men in Pakistan that are ready to march into India to liberate Kashmir. We quoted him.
Yeah.
And the issue of Kashmir in Article 35 and 370 was something that was being widely reported. And we got shadow banned for an entire month. Yeah? And you said to me, I remember, you said, Dilly, look, head up, chin up. We're going to face this. It's normal. We just need to crack on. Yeah? And you're absolutely right. It's one of the best advices I ever received. May Allah bless you. I mean, but given that we're facing these issues on Facebook, on YouTube, on these social media platforms, do you think there will ever come a time where we seriously have to think about an alternative platform which isn't controlled and regulated by those who are sympathetic to Israel, those who are sympathetic towards India and China?
I think eventually, yes. At the moment, I think they are like quite high profile people are looking into that. But I think the culture needs to change, and until you get people off these platforms, I don't think people are going to go to a Muslim one or an Islamic one to their platform. But I think that Facebook is notorious for this, and I know they even have this problem with Christian groups in America. You know, the hardcore Christian groups. They get shadow banned a lot, and their content gets taken down as well, very frequently. And I think one of them is taking Facebook to court, but you know, we don't have that kind of money, you know, behind us. But I think that you know, when they took our page down first time round, we had over 400,000 followers.
Yes.
I remember clearly, and then 2 days later, when we hit that reach, 2 days later, it just went completely gone. Tried to appeal it, nothing. They wouldn't respond. Tried to contact them on Twitter, the directors or the CEO.
Yeah.
Nothing, no response whatsoever. Obviously, you know, as humans, we get disheartened and we get upset, but alhamdulillah, it's something that is what my wife told me as well. She plays a big role in DOAM as well.
MashaAllah.
And she told me that, look here, you could start again. It's okay. We start again, refresh, come up with new ideas, new thoughts, new concepts, and alhamdulillah, that's what we kept on doing. And alhamdulillah, it's still getting up there, and whether it's Instagram or even Twitter, it's the same thing. When we get banned or shadow banned, it's time to reflect, time to think about new ideas. What can we do to avoid that, etc. But yeah, it's one of those things where, unfortunately, in our work, in any dawah work, you will get these obstacles in the way, and it's a test for us.
No. So, you know, currently there's quite a few DOAM pages. You have one in Bengali. You have one in... What languages do you have? You have Bengali, Arabic?
Arabic, Urdu.
Yep.
French.
Yep.
Kurdish.
Yep.
And
but
we're looking to do one in Turkish.
Okay.
German soon.
So you've got these 5 language offshoot pages, right?
Yes.
But then there's 2 main pages. There's one that's got 187,000, and there's a really active one which is around 40,000.
Yes. The reason why, because we created that backup page, is
Yeah.
because we started getting shadow banned.
Yeah.
And what they did was, and I think is the footage regarding to the anti-Muslim crimes in India.
Yeah.
And they just shadow ban you without any reason. And for those who don't know what shadow ban is, shadow ban basically, it puts you way off the news feeds. Your content is not viewable on the news feed. You can't, the only way somebody can see your work is by going directly to your page.
Yeah. Yeah. And basically, every single person who would normally see a DOAM or a 5 pillars notification, it no longer exists.
No, it's just-
You have to manually go search it. And there's even this weird sign. This. Do you remember? They give you this sign saying you have been shadow banned. It will not reach people's notification. And I think the first time we experienced that, as I already mentioned earlier, I was so disheartened, bro. I was so disheartened, and I was like, I can't believe it. Just click of a finger, just like this.
Yeah.
But then I realized this is the reality of our work, and I needed to speak to you to understand that, you know what, perhaps this may even be a sign that inshallah our work is accepted. Who knows?
Inshallah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then whenever these kind of stumbling blocks happen, it reminds me of the challenges of Nuh alayhi salam, right? A beloved prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who gave da'wah for 900 years. And then how many of his people joined him in that ship? A handful, yeah, at best. And he gave da'wah for 900 years. And I guess I would even go as far as to say that if your work isn't being highlighted by the enemies of Islam, and you're not facing these stumbling blocks and obstacles, maybe even reflect upon what you're actually pushing out, right? Because if you've got an easy ride, I mean, alhamdulillah, if you got an easy ride, you got an easy ride. But at the same time, you need to ask yourself that if you're not being pursued, you're not being hunted down, you're not being looked to be censored, then, you know, there may be something which you perhaps need to consider in terms of priorities. Anyway, what advice would you then give to up-and-coming pages that want to share content like DOAM, raw footage of attacks, raw footage of anti-Muslim attacks, scenes from war-torn areas? What things can you advise to avoid getting their pages shut? Because we also know that whilst there is a sinister ideological agenda of Facebook and Zuckerberg and these guys, there's also an algorithm which you can't help control, yeah? And it's a CPU-based algorithm. So they'll identify certain words, they'll identify certain things, and then bang, straight away, that post can get taken down, or you can get shadow banned. What advice would you give to those who want to upload this kind of content?
First things first, never post graphic. What I mean by graphic is bodies being torn, or, you know, like blood everywhere, etc. Those kind of content, and I'm pretty sure you've seen, you know, some videos where Facebook allows to keep them on, but they have that overlay,
Yep.
which says this contains graphic photo or graphic
The
video.
cover.
Yeah, the cover. So they do that sometimes, where they won't delete it, but they just put that cover on. So no graphic footage of any sort of anybody being maimed or anything like that. Even in regards to fighting now, you know, like, just say an Islamophobic attack, where you're being, especially if it's a minor, avoid those kind of videos. Or the best thing to do is to blur them out.
Okay.
Yes, definitely you have to blur these things out. Even with the graphic one, if you can manage to blur them out and it's okay, presentable, and not showing any graphic at all, and it's blurred out, then that's fine as well. And number 3 is your text, the words that you use. I mean, I've seen some, you know, on other pages where, and they've asked me as well. Another brother asked me once where he posted like a graphic, not too much graphic, but it's okay, footage on Facebook, and the words he was using, like, it was like horrendous, like,
Give us an example.
you know, go and attack them, and
Oh yeah, good
etc,
lord.
etc. Those kind of things, especially with the, you know, with the algorithm, that will be taken down. I mean,
Good.
even if you post Tommy Robinson's video, generally they'll take it down straight away.
Because an algorithm setting has been placed now for Tommy Robinson and the EDL.
That's right.
Yeah.
And also, and the 4th thing is always back up your work. You have to back up your work, because obviously if you have other platforms, like you're on Telegram or Instagram or Reddit or, you know, Instagram and all these other platforms, it's good to have a backup as well, so you never lose that, you know, footage or content, etc.
That's a lot of work, Zahid, man. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Wallahi, that's a lot of work. So who's behind DOAM? You?
Myself, my wife, she plays a big role behind the scenes.
MashaAllah.
She's very supportive, and to be honest, without counsel and advice, I would not be anywhere. Uh, to make sure everything is okay and everything, and double check everything. Alhamdulillah. Then we have other few brothers. They don't want to be mentioned.
Take, that's fine.
But
Would you
but
say that?
sorry,
Would you say the bulk of the work,
Yes.
you and your wife?
it's me and my wife. Yeah.
May Allah subhanahu wa
But
ta'ala accept
I'm
it from you
trying
both.
to
I mean,
step back a bit, which I'm
What-
trying
why?
to do. That.
Why?
Because I want to do other things and pursue other things. But to keep on doing this, but I want to pursue other things as well.
like,
Uh,
tell us.
like furthering my Arabic.
Okay.
Focusing on the Arabic side of DOAM, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
Etc. But it's all volunteer based. We don't get paid whatsoever. Or feasibility. We don't ask for donations because we're not the type of organization that needs funding, because all this can be done, alhamdulillah.
Okay. So that actually brings me to my next area of discussion: funding and volunteer work. Yeah. Now I know that you've had a long track record of refusing donations, and brothers and sisters who've wanted to support your work, you've redirected them to organisations which you feel are worthy of supporting. Right. Now, is it a case that you're always going to maintain that position, or is it that you genuinely feel that the work you guys are doing can be done on a volunteer basis?
It will continue like this. I believe the funds can be used elsewhere. Fundamentally, I believe that it could be used elsewhere. That, for example, like Cage or Hugs, or yourself, where you have a much more, like, a wider audience and you cover a lot more things. Like, especially with Cage and Hugs, it's much more practical. And supporting those organizations and donating towards them will help us in the future, because obviously if something happens to us or we're being censored and we need to take action, obviously we're going to refer to Cage, etc. for advice or even legal advice, etc. And so supporting them would be a lot better than donating towards us, because we're just doing, it's all internet based. There's nothing.
But it has human hours, though, Zahid.
Say it again, sorry.
It has human hours, surely. Okay,
Human hours it does, but like now, most of our like posters and like the footage, we've already created templates for them, and all that needs to be done is replace the text, replace the footage or the image, and Bismillah, export, and off you go. This is not a problem.
So would you say
at the
then?
beginning, yes,
Yeah.
obviously at the beginning there was a lot of work, a lot of work, because obviously doing this work you have to research, read, and everything, etc.
Absolutely.
And then it becomes second nature, bro.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Right now we're doing a podcast, right?
Yeah.
And we have our beautiful brother Mohsin, aka Dawud Digital, who's filming this podcast, right? Now, it would be wonderful if he did every single one of these for free. It really would. But the point of the matter is that certain services require
Absolutely.
to be paid, right?
Of course.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. When it comes to video footage takes 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm pinching it from DOAM, it takes 2 minutes. Yeah?
Yes.
But articles take time. Reviews take time. Podcasts take time. Investigating stories takes time. To send a reporter to cover Shukri Abdi's case up north takes time. To provide back-to-back media support for the parents protesting in Birmingham over LGBT issues takes time.
Of course.
So what I'm trying to...
I like how you covered, the Christchurch massacre.
Yeah.
How you said, yeah, of course, I understand that, and
So-
organizations like yourself need that support,
But what I'm saying that as DOAM expands...
As DOAM expands, yes. Excuse me.
That's fine.
Can you go back upstairs, please?
This is wicked. I
What's
love
I'm
the...
having that BBC moment.
No, that's fine. Assalamu alaikum.
Come on. Upstairs. You can see him
I love-
afterwards, okay?
I love it. I love these moments.
Good boy. Okay.
Inshallah. So as DOAM expands, because I've noticed that it is predominantly video and image based, video and infographic, which you're absolutely right, bro. If you've got a template, a video or an image with text takes 5-10 minutes max.
Yes.
Yeah. But other stuff requires actual human hours, yeah? So I'm saying that if in that case, are you saying that you're going to specifically stick to those two types of content as your predominant type of content?
At the moment, that will continue. But we've also trying to do like live videos on Instagram or Facebook and YouTube. Then we're hoping to look into other things where we actually go out and interview people. But yeah, I'm assuming that a time will come where obviously we will need funding
Inshallah.
for certain services like yourself. Then until then, now, alhamdulillah, we're okay at the moment.
Alhamdulillah. Bro, can I just say, I don't want to throw dirt in your face, and I've said it on previous podcasts, but I just want to say that I'm a super personal fan of DOAM. I just wanted to say it on camera. And I've said it previously, that a significant amount of the raw footage content that we share is from DOAM. And in fact, when it comes to documenting oppression, especially in the Muslim majority world, wallahi, I see you guys as leaders in this field. And for those of you, our listeners and our viewers who are watching this, please go over to DOAM, subscribe to their channels, Instagram, Twitter, like all their pages on Facebook, and support their work in any capacity that you can. So, moving on from that, there's another interesting topic that I want to talk about. And for those of you who don't know, me and Zahid, we have a very brotherly relationship, and we have lots of WhatsApp conversations, and sometimes I would say we even vent at each other. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
With our frustrations about things that we're seeing about the Muslim world and stuff like this. One of the things that I want to talk to you about is the current situation of our Uyghur brothers and sisters and our Turkic brothers and sisters in occupied East Turkestan, right? Whereby a recent law has passed through the US government, where they're going to basically punish and penalize Chinese officials who are responsible for oppressing and putting Uyghur Muslims into internment concentration camps, yeah? The question I want to ask you is this. Predominantly, the most prominent Uyghur human rights groups and campaigning groups are currently in the US or in Canada. And they are heavily, predominantly lobbying the US government. And essentially, in many ways, they're championing the US government as one of their main strategic allies in this battle against the Chinese regime. Now, we've seen this before. We've seen this with the Kurds. We've seen this with the Shia of Iraq. We've seen this with a number of Syrian groups. We've seen this many times where genuine oppressed Muslims, even the Palestinians who some groups and leaders from amongst them still go to the UN to get some kind of resolution, to get some kind of peace agreement, etc. And we've seen this continuously where genuine oppressed Muslims, where you and I can never understand their oppression. Yeah, we can see it, we can understand, we can share it, but we can never feel it. We have our wives, we have our children, we have our security, we have our food, shelter, clothing intact, yeah? But they seek assistance and alliances from the likes of the US, and lest we forget who the US are. 1 million dead in Iraq, 100,000 dead in Afghanistan, Muslims in Somalia, Yemen, Pakistan killed by drones, yeah? What do you do in this situation, Zahid? How do we advise our brothers and sisters, not just from the Uyghur community, but mainly the Uyghur community for now, but others who seek assistance and aid from those who we know are also the enemies of Islam and Muslims?
Specifically to the Uyghur community, to be honest with you, on the outset, let oppressors attack oppressors. Let them fight each other off. That's a good thing. So whatever sanctions that come about against Chinese officials or their companies or that operate in East Turkestan and aid in the oppression of the Uyghur community, yes, we welcome that. Of course, we welcome any sort of action that's going to relieve some oppression. But in terms of a long-term strategy and a long-term goal, the Uyghur community need to look at their own history. To be honest with you, I mean, in the 1930s, the 1920s,
They had two states.
they had two states, and you had one side. You had on the west you had the Soviet Union, on the east you had China. Both want control of the area of the whole country because obviously it's natural resources, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And uh, what they used to do was Soviet Union used to back the resistant movement against China.
Yeah.
Then China used to back the resistant movement against the Soviet Union. But in the 1930s, when it all came at loggerheads, the Soviet Union basically backstabbed the Uyghurs.
They did.
Last minute, and then basically China occupied the whole region.
Yep.
And that's what basically crushed the revolution. And you've not seen any revolution of that magnitude since then. But in the long term, they need to really think that, and we both know that the US and Donald Trump and Mike Pence and all these officials, they're only using the Uyghur community as a leverage or a tool to further their own aims. Because
against China.
Against China.
Yeah.
So essentially, the reason why they're against China, obviously, you got this virus going on, but before that, it was the trade war.
Yep.
And America does not want. I mean, they're even trying to get the UK government not to, use the Hawaii, the Hawaii technology.
Yes.
In the networks. So therefore, the Uyghur community are unfortunately going to be let down big time, in my view, in the long term.
It's inevitable, isn't it?
It's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's happened, like you said, with the Kurds, with the Iraqis, the Shia, in Iraq, how they were used and abused, and then they got attacked by them. Because what America wants at the end of the day is global domination.
And its own interests.
Yes, it's all interest. China wants the same thing as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there was a Chinese professor that said 70% of the economy in East Turkestan of China comes from East Turkestan. So you could imagine why anybody wants to tap in the area. It makes sense now, reading history, why Soviet Union wanted that area so badly.
Absolutely.
And the British. So my advice to them is, yes, we welcome any sort of sanctions against these officials to relieve oppression, but as a long-term strategy, why is it that you want independent? Is it going to be independent? Are there going to be strings attached? Are you going to get US oil companies to come out and extract your oil, your gas, and then therefore all the subsidies and everything will go towards them, and while you get pennies? That's one aspect of it from the economy point of view. But from another point of view, do they want a secular state? Do
Absolutely.
They want a democracy state? What kind of state do you want? And I know many Uyghurs, personally, are practicing Muslims, and they don't want a secular state.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree.
State.
Yeah.
Many of them actually do want a Muslim, state, like in the 1930s before.
Because both those states were Islamic republics, weren't they?
Yes, they were Islamic republics.
And there's Sharia in the constitution.
Yes, absolutely. And even before that, the Ottoman Khilafah supported them.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah.
But this is the biggest question mark surrounding that whole area. Now, I know Donald Trump, he released a statement this week saying that he's going to announce something big by the end of this week regarding to the Uyghur, the act, the Human Rights Act. I don't know what that is going to be, but I just it's disheartening as well at the same time, because you don't want them to fall in the same traps as the rest of the whole.
But we have seen it, haven't we? We've seen it. We and I agree with you wholeheartedly, bro. At the end of the day,
but you know what as well. Also, the Muslim countries backstab them, bro.
100%.
When they last year, when the 22 Western countries signed, a letter condemning these concentration camps and the oppression of the Uyghur community.
Yeah.
As a response, China got 50 countries, majority of them Muslim countries, including Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Morocco.
To legitimize what they're doing.
Somalia, to basically, and they are official signatories, by the way.
Yeah, of course.
Basically, and they supported the Chinese concentration camps. What's happening to the Uyghurs? How they're destroying Islam there, the culture, the language.
Just imagine that level of treachery.
Yes. So,
Wallahi,
so on one hand, I could see their viewpoint.
Absolutely.
But at the other hand, it's are you really going to gain freedom at the end of it?
I mean, look, I think we're on the same page here, and and those of our Uyghur brothers and sisters who are going to be watching this and listening to this podcast, we say this to you. Absolutely, when oppressors and enemies of Islam and Muslims fight one another, it's a good thing. When they're fighting each other, they're not killing Muslims, or they're not killing Muslims to the level in which they would have been if they weren't fighting each other.
Absolutely.
Now, this is a consistent position within our tradition, not a problem. But the Syrians have been there. The Palestinians have been there. All those seeking statehood have been there. And there's a number of things you have to identify. And really, I guess our message is to those who are Islamically inclined. Those who are set in their ways to want a secular liberal state, or a state which has zero to little Islam as part of its identity, I guess his message will fall on deaf ears, yeah?
Yes, absolutely.
And it's sad it's going to be those that are going to be the most disappointed once America truly chooses its maslaha and chooses to continue trade with China. But what we'll say to you is this: do not be disheartened by the treachery of the Muslim rulers, because wallahi there's khair in the ummah, and just like there is khair in the ummah over Kashmir, over Palestine, over Syria, over Somalia, over Afghanistan, never ever think to yourself that the treachery and the selling out of Muslim rulers and governments is reflective of the ummah. Yeah? Unless you happen to be an ardent Pakistani or Turkish nationalist, right? Who again, they very little Islam to refer to their worldview. There is khair in the ummah, right? And I will humbly say this as well, that wallahi in human history, in Islamic history, never has liberation taken place at the hands of non-Muslims. Would you agree with me, Zahid?
I agree with you.
Never. From the time of Medina to 1924, in that period, there has never been a case where a non-Muslim entity or polity or a king or a emperor or a state has come and liberated Muslims and left them liberated. Yeah?
Never.
And never in human history, never in the history of mankind, from Adam alayhi salam to now, has an oppressor willingly woke up and given up their oppression. Have they? They have either been removed by a miracle of Allah, right? Or from a punishment of Allah. They have either been removed from jihad fi sabilillah, one which is legitimate, which was done within the frameworks of the Sharia and Islam, or external intervention. That's the only 3 times oppression has been removed. Would you agree with me, Zahid?
I agree with you.
Yeah? Either Allah has removed oppressors through miracles and punishments, either the people have fought for their independence, or an external power which tends to have an affinity, whether it's religion or race, to then intervene and to help those people.
Absolutely.
That's the only time, brothers and sisters. That's the only time in Islamic history and human history that's the only time liberation has come. So whilst fine for strategic purposes out of a genuine hardship that the Muslim governments have sold your cause out, like they've sold Palestine out, like they've sold so many causes out.
They sold
Yeah?
Kashmir out.
Sold Kashmir. Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody.
Look, the Arab League expelled Bashar. Yeah? In 2013-14. Now they're talking about bringing him back in.
Yes.
Yeah?
And they're opening the embassies back
Yes.
to Damascus.
Yeah, wallahi, my dear brothers and sisters of the Uyghur and Turkic people, the blessed and noble Uyghur and Turkic people, the Syrians have been there, the Palestinians have been there, the Kashmiris have been there, where they have sought assistance and aid from the UN and the West. And by all means, if you have the access, naturally you're going to exhaust all things that are available. I get that. But know that liberation from an Islamic context will only come from your fellow Muslims. That's it. So I believe that whilst, yes, by all means, utilize all the lobbying and all the means that you have, know that they can and they will switch sides at a click of a finger.
Absolutely, yeah.
At a click of a finger. There was a time where the Western government side, do you remember 2013, 14, beginning of it, they're talking about regime change, moving Bashar. Then they realized, you know what? Bashar is better than these Sunni Islamists. Yeah? Because we can't control these lot. We can't control, they're not the kind of Islamist rebels we can control. Like, let's say in Libya, let's say Al-Nahda in Tunisia. We can't control these lot, so our interests are not protected. These lot might actually go and implement a state and a Sharia which we can't really accept. Yeah, so we need to support Bashar. We need to let Russia do what they need to do. Brothers and sisters, we've been there too many times. Do you understand?
I mean, sorry.
No, go on.
US is in decline now.
Yeah.
I mean, they have been for probably more so in the past decade.
Yeah.
But now Russia has moved in the region, and obviously it's you're moving away from American imperialism in the region to Russian imperialism. And when Bashar al-Assad said, or his soldiers, in the beginning of the conflict in 2011, his Shabiha, his security forces, wrote on the walls, on the streets, that in Arabic, Bashar al-Assad, or we burn down the whole country. And he actually meant it.
Literally
And
meant
he
it.
did, and that's what he's done basically. He's done the whole, he's burnt down the whole country, and he meant it. And nobody in the world has said anything to him. Rather, what they're trying to do now is normalize back to relations with him, and that's what's happening now.
And it's crazy that the criminal organization ISIS, which makes up what 0.0005% of the Ummah at best, they carried out crimes, but the 3-4 years of hundreds and thousands of Muslims being butchered was not enough for the West to intervene. And let me just be also clear. I don't know about Zahid, but I don't support Western intervention. Do you understand?
No, I don't.
I support Muslim intervention. Muslims should intervene to assist other Muslims. Yeah, irrelevant of your ethnicity or nationality, because we're Ummat al-Wahid. Yeah, but it just shows the inconsistency, brothers and sisters, right? That it took a 73-nation coalition to bomb Raqqa to the Stone Ages and create more criminals that then carried out acts in the West. Yeah, but the hundreds and thousands that Bashar killed for 3-4 years, the chemical attacks, that all went unanswered. Those red lines that Obama and Cameron all spoke about, all got transgressed and little happened.
Absolutely. And remember, those figures are very conservative.
Yeah, very conservative figures, of course.
And what they did as well in Mosul as well.
Subhanallah, yeah.
And what they did there is, for some reason, you got all these like hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, and those are in jail as well, being tortured, etc. Not a single word about them, or let's liberate them. It's all, like you said, and it's more apparent now these days that you could see that they have their interest at heart, and whatever's like Morsi, how they toppled him.
Yeah.
It was not, obviously it's not in Israel's favor, and it's not in the America's favor. So in the end, he was toppled.
Yeah.
And he was short-lived, unfortunately. But that's the way they want to keep these dictators for decades in power, and they don't care if people are living in destitute poverty. They're being tortured. I mean, the CIA rendition program.
Exactly.
They send them to Muslim rulers.
Egypt, Syria, Jordan, exactly.
And Libya and all these places to get tortured on their behalf. And because in the West, obviously they can't do that.
They can't do that. Yeah, of course.
But in the Muslim, in the Middle East, you can do that and get away with it.
So look, I mean, so granted that we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always that victory comes to the oppressed Muslims, that their difficulty is uplifted and is replaced by security and something which is just and reflective of the deen of Islam, inshallah. But with the situation of the Uyghurs, right, what advice would you give them that, okay, fine, many of your leading campaigners, namely in the US, are lobbying the US government, and we hope that you're strategically aware of what may come, or what we would argue is inevitable, that America will sell you out at a drop of a hat, It's just a matter of time when it needs to understand its economical maslaha, and that's it, it's done. Would you advise that they continue their efforts with the Muslim Ummah and the people of the Muslim world?
Sorry, repeat the question.
Like, would you suggest, or what's your thoughts on that? The efforts of lobbying, raising awareness, and awakening the Muslim Ummah more than perhaps Western governments.
I think definitely we need to work on the Muslim governments. The Muslim, Kuwait is changing their mind. a little bit, but obviously a lot more work needs to be done, and I think that's where our area of focus should be. Um, Especially with what's happening in India, and I'm not sure if you're aware. The Arab princes and the princesses, although
Yes.
they have their own
Yeah,
ulterior
they've-
motive, they're speaking out against them. And India, the BJP government are shaking a bit because obviously
Loads of
all
Indian
all
Hindus
their
out there,
economy
yeah.
is based on the
Absolutely.
countries. And I think more focus should be on the Muslim politicians, the Muslim
Governments.
Muslim governments, the business people, etc., the reformers, the thinkers of this ummah, the scholars. That's where our focus should be, and until that changes, like you said, Western intervention is only going to lead to failure. So until we start focusing on our own people, like in Pakistan, or especially Pakistan, for example, and
Be careful what you say, Zahid.
especially in Pakistan, like their relationship with China, for example, and we all know it's a slave-master relationship.
Yeah, it's not an equal partnership, and many Pakistanis know this as well.
Yeah, and we need to focus on these group of people within the Muslim world, and then you'll see change, inshallah. Like you said, liberation can only come through
The Muslimin.
Muslim.
That's it.
Not Western intervention.
Yeah, of course not. And I'd advise the same to Muslim brothers and sisters in Bangladesh, that obviously you have, whether you like to admit it or not, a very slave-master relationship with India, right?
Yeah.
And in all honesty, that if the leadership there, which I don't hold any hope for with Hasina, the tyrant, but if ever a leadership came which had some cojones and had some steel and a backbone, that you could apply real pressure, right?
Yes.
That India relies on countries like, you get the example of China and Pakistan, but let me just give one that's more closer to personally. India relies on countries like Bangladesh for trade, for commerce, for trade routes, yeah? That it accesses the East, it accesses Burma, it takes key products from Bangladesh, and then it makes millions, if not billions of dollars from it. But I think this entire discussion boils down to leadership, isn't it, Zahid?
Yes, it's leadership.
It's leadership, isn't it? Right?
Absolutely.
And this is where we might get labelled Khariji, troublemakers, revolutionaries, and all this kind of labels that's quite commonly thrown about.
The irony is that we're not calling for any of that sort.
Exactly.
All we're saying is, look, we're individuals, right? And what we're saying is, we need to educate our people that, don't turn a blind eye, stop burying your heads in the sand, and wake up, and get some change. But I think also nationalism is a big obstacle in the ummah.
It's one of the biggest obstacles, I would
One
say.
of the biggest one. After the era of nation states now, and our ummah, the concept of ummah, is unfortunately many of us only see as our own family, our own brotherly, our own tribe, our own country, or the people that are same color or language, etc. We cannot see anybody else for some reason who's from a different country, from a different culture, as our own Muslim brother. They say that the far right exists in the West, but also exists in the East as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, it does.
And you're seeing a lot of that lately in Turkey. Anti-Syrian racism is increasing. It's increasing more than ever. The attacks against Syrian refugees there. You're seeing now as well, Rohingya. During the month of Ramadan, Rohingya were being attacked verbally by journalists, etc. In Malaysia.
Yeah.
Even in our pages when we're highlighting in 2017, when the Myanmar attacked them,
Yeah.
they were leaving their homes going into Bangladesh.
To Bangladesh, yeah.
We even had people say, "Look, why do you want these filthy, dirty people in our country?" That's the language that we come across, and unfortunately, until this mindset changes, we're still gonna be in the same situation we're in.
Look, I gave a lecture, which should be on screen. It was called Nationalism and State of the Ummah. And one of the things I addressed from my perspective is that when you look at the condition of the Ummah, what is one of the biggest obstacles that is affecting us to prosper collectively, right? And we have seen throughout Islamic history, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ to the Khulafa al-Rashideen and those who came after, that there was a central focus on good leadership and unity. Yani, subhanAllah, brothers and sisters, lying is a sin. Lying, many regard is a major sin. But the fact that there is some clemency for you to lie to bring two camps of Muslims together shows you how important unity is.
Absolutely.
Yeah? That you're not allowed to lie. It's haram, you're sinful. You'll be punished for it. But you're allowed to lie to bring two warring factions of Muslims together.
Yes.
And the fact that we have so many statements from the Prophet ﷺ and from the Sahaba, may Allah be pleased with them all, where we focus about good leadership, strong leadership, leadership with a backbone, leadership that's based on Islamic principles, a leadership which is proud of its Islam and the unity of the Ummah. This is not something that's ajib. This is not something that's strange to us. There are so many references to it in the Quran and Sunnah, right? So, yeah, we can do the one Ummah card when it comes to Hajj. We can do the one Ummah when it comes to Salah. But it appears that for many of us, we don't...
Or one Eid or...
One Eid, yeah, but the concept of... And by the way, we're not writing off one Eid. It's a very good concept, mashallah. But the point here is that we seem to want the one Ummah on areas that is very easy to implement.
Absolutely.
Yeah? But when it actually comes to acting, being the mouth and investing your health and your time and your wealth, it seems that we don't want it.
Nah, it's what the Prophet ﷺ said, that, the love of the dunya.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately what it is, unfortunately. And what our own interests are. And, and also this thing of maintaining the status quo. We're so comfortable in our own selves and the way we live, etc. We just don't want to shift from that.
Absolutely.
Because once you move away from that, Allah is going to definitely test you.
100%.
If you're going down a path where, for example, you call into Allah, for example, etc., you are going to be tested. No matter what you say or what you do, you're going to be tested with your family, your children, your wealth, etc. But for many of us, we want to, unfortunately, we just want to stay in the same boat as we are and just let time go by and that's it, and let somebody else do the work. There's no difference to, when Bani Israel, the followers of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, when they told him, look, you go and fight Allah
with your Lord.
You go fight
your Lord.
And we come later.
Yeah. And just to add to that point Zahid made, and it's such an important example, did that generation of Bani Israel be given victory?
No,
they didn't. Allah made sure that generation got removed, and then victory came under Yusha bin Nun alayhi salam. Because that was the generation, brothers and sisters, that was perpetuated by oppression. They saw the sea split. They saw so many ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and yet they refused to fight. And remember this, Allah had promised victory. They just had to enter the gates, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Allah had promised them victory. What did they say? There's a strong army there. They wanted it to basically say, Yallah, come. They did not want to fight. So brothers and sisters, wallahi, takes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this in Surah Al-Baqarah and throughout the Quran, about those who told Musa alayhi salam that you go fight with your Lord. And Allah did not grant them victory until there was a generation that was born that was worthy of victory. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are from that generation and not the one that was not given the victory. Ameen. Bringing the podcast to a close, bringing it more closer to the UK, yeah? Obviously we spoke about a number of outlets in my quickfire questions to you, and I would say alhamdulillah, there is a genuine brotherly relationship, a cordial relationship with the likes of DOAM, Islam 21C, Ilm Freedom, five pillars. Yeah, yes, there is generally, there's a brotherly warm relationship there, but there and of course moving forward we will absolutely collaborate to show a show of unity and strength, inshallah, on mutual causes and stuff like this. Do you appreciate that, however, that said, that there will be, naturally, where there's areas of overlaps and agreements, there will also be areas of disagreement?
Of course, yes.
Case in point, our good brothers at Ilmfeed and Islam 21C, they adorn Erdogan, right? Whereas Five Pillars and DOAM are more critical of Erdogan.
Yes.
Yeah? And so therefore these kind of things are interesting areas, isn't it? It's characteristic of who we are. So, I mean, with these kind of, I mean, that was just one example. There are others, the whole kind of political participation in democratic elections, and you know, where me and you personally, we don't vote because we don't deem it to be permissible. Whereas the other two, Islam 21C deem it obviously an obligation in some certain circumstances. Ilmfi don't really get into it, but obviously as individual views, they believe it to be obviously permissible as well. Now, given these kind of differences with our brothers who also do fantastic work, do you think it's important that we do continue collaboration when and where it's possible?
Of course, for sure, we have to do this. If we don't, we can't be like left alone and do like our own thing in a way. We also have to do collaborative work, whether it's to do with media, whether it's to do with training people on certain aspects like addressing the media, etc. For sure, we definitely need collaborative work, and we definitely need that. Although we may disagree on certain issues, that's natural anyway.
Because the unity is more important than that, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, looking at the online Muslim media landscape, right? We've got yourselves. We've got Ilmfeed, mashallah, Islam 21C, Five Pillars. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, the Muslim vibe are there, right? Yeah. There are others that are there. Given this landscape, and given that nowhere else in the Western world is there this many online media outlets, is this something very telling of the UK Muslim community? But if you go to the US, bro, and Canada, there is no DOAM. There's nothing. They've got this magazine called The Muslim Girl, which is just batil and fahisha, yeah? And they've got the Yaqeen Institute, which is more of an Islamic institute, think tank kind of thing. Yeah. But there's no media outlet. And yeah, in North America, in the United States and in Canada, there is no online Muslim media outlet. Yes, they have a Muslim Matters, fine, that's fine. But Muslim Matters is very much similar to, I would humbly say, I could be wrong, it's a bit like an Islam 21C.
Yes.
Yeah. But an actual news website which is producing news on a daily basis, it doesn't exist. And it doesn't really exist in Europe either.
No, it doesn't.
Why do you think the UK is unique in that we have 4 or 5 doing different kinds of works? We're just special, aren't we? That's what it is, isn't it?
I don't know, but I really don't know. I think the Muslims in this country, they want to cling on to more onto the deen. And they want to do da'wah work. They want to go out and do things that help the community, even the non-Muslim community as well. And I think that in terms of media, I never knew that there's nothing in America.
There isn't.
There was.
No, there isn't. There's only Muslim Matters, bro. There's only Muslim Matters. There's nothing. There's nothing in Canada and nothing in thingy.
I really don't know what that is, but I think maybe because we understand the importance of controlling a specific narrative, whether it's feed something that's positive and that Muslims do good things, etc., or like yourselves where you're covering certain investigation reports, etc., into certain like for example like Shukri, Abdi, etc., like ourselves in a particular area highlighting oppression. I think maybe we understand that there's a need for this work more than the rest, because maybe they in those regions they're probably more scattered out and not really united, or they have their own little suburbs where they just, whatever my mosque is or my community center is, that's what we follow and that's what we do.
I mean, I agree. Yes. So on top of that, what I have found, because I've not visited the US, I don't have no plans to visit the US, but I've been to Canada, and obviously these countries are significantly bigger Like from a landmass point of view, they're huge. Yeah. So the Muslim communities are more scattered. Unless you're talking about Toronto and New York and these kind of places, then yes, you'll get concentrated Muslim communities. Second thing I have found, and wallahi, brothers and sisters, our American and North American viewers and listeners, especially those from the Mad Mamluks, this is no attack or anything negative against you. We're not making sweeping generalization, but what I found, and what we actually discussed in episode 1 of the Blood Brothers with Sim from the Mad Mamluks, is that I found that Muslims in America, and broadly speaking Canada as well, but more so America, have wholeheartedly bought into American patriotism, right? Which has made it very difficult to have an ummatic view. That's not to say that they don't care about the ummah, of course not, but it's more of a case of a mindset and priority, yeah?
Absolutely.
I think that also the majority of the Muslims in America, bar the black Muslims, the African American Muslims, who were the earliest Muslims in the US, right? They are diaspora communities, whereas we came here, our forefathers came here in the 40s and 50s, the economic migrants, as essentially from the former colonies, yeah? So there's a far more, not antagonistic, but there's a far more, a stronger relationship in understanding our heritage. Right? In that, yes, we were colonized by the Brits for 200 years. We came here to rebuild this country. And so therefore, I think there's a bit more, not izzah, but there's a bit more fire in us to understand the various needs of the community.
Absolutely.
Would you think that's a fair assessment?
Yes, that's a fair assessment, yes.
And I know American brothers think that we're ghettoized and we're not that educated and we're far more sectarian in our ways. I understand that those are some generalization stereotypes that some of our North American brothers and sisters have about us. But I would humbly say that I would rather have that than a wholehearted approach and internalization of American patriotism, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing Sheikh Asrar Rashid said to me on our podcast, he said, look, when Salafis are set in their ways of defending Salafis, and Brelvis do the same, and the Abandis do the same, and Ikhwanis do the same, and Hizb ut-Tahrir do the same, and all the different groups in the UK are entrenched in upholding their manhaj or their thingy. Because what that actually, that creates a healthy environment. It keeps everyone on their toes. Yeah. Whereas when you start letting go of everything, right? Yeah. This is when at least it's better to have Aqidah and Manhaj debates than to debate the fundamentals of the deen.
Absolutely.
Yeah? So, and I think there's truth in that, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Yeah, I agree with that.
When he said that, I thought, that's actually right. Because if you're set in your ways, which isn't always good for unity, by the way, but if you're set in your ways and wanting to uphold and defend your manhaj, your things, it's healthy. It just keeps the discussion and the izzah alive in your respective way of thinking, I think.
It also creates people to think and reflect and ponder more.
Absolutely.
They do research themselves and get more closer to the deen. I mean, I remember in the late 1990s, 97, 98, 99, I mean, there's, the young Muslim camps, all these, I remember those camps where all the brothers used to go to, etc., etc. And I think we very much cling on to the deen more, and we don't want to know how much, they're trying their best to get us away from the deen.
Yeah.
We want to keep hold of it regardless, and I think that's within us a fundamental characteristic that we have in this country.
Yeah, I mean, if you compare, again, brothers and sisters who are not from the UK, please do not take offense. We're not making sweeping generalizations. It's just something that's very blatantly observable. If you were to compare the Muslim community of the UK to, let's say, the Muslim community in France, yeah, institutionally we're far better organized. Institutionally we're far more united on certain causes, whether it be Prevent, whether it be LGBTQ, whether it be Israel and stuff like this. Yeah. And I just think that the Islamic identity of Muslims in the UK is far more potent, right? And we're far more resistant to assimilation. I found that. That's not to say that we don't have sellouts, some people who have assimilated. Absolutely we do. Yeah. And absolutely we have Muslims who have assimilated, who have adopted secular liberalism. Yes, we have that. But I just think as a community, we've shown good levels of resistance.
Absolutely,
in comparison to other communities in Europe and North America.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah. So, Zahid, conclude with some advice to Muslims who are going to be listening or watching this podcast, and they may think to themselves, but we're in the UK, we're in the US. What can we really do for our brothers and sisters in Palestine, in Syria, in Kashmir, in Africa? What can we actually practically do? I mean, what can sharing a video do? What can sharing an infographic do? We've got our own issues here. We've got anti-Muslim hate crimes. We've got Islamophobia. We're getting, our mosques are being attacked. Our sisters are being attacked. Our priorities are here. Why are you guys always continuously telling us about what's happening here? Showing us graphic footage and, heartbreaking stories. What would your advice be to those Muslims, predominantly in the West, who don't, for whatever reason, have a proportionate ummatic view of what's happening in the Muslim world?
Look, the Prophet ﷺ said that if you see a munkar or an evil action, you change it with your hand. If you can't change it with your hand, you speak about it. And if you can't speak about it, it has to be in your heart, and that's the lowest form of iman.
Yeah.
And whether we like it or not, all of us fit in one of those categories. And you can only do with, obviously, in this country, what you can do within your means and capabilities is by, for example, like protesting, lobbying, like for example, like Kashmir, like lobbying certain MPs. You can protest, you can write letters, you can organize events, talks, etc. That's obviously, you're limited in what you can do, but at least you're doing something, rather than doing nothing and saying, oh well, I'm in this country and I'm so focused on here. Yes, we focus on what's happening in this country. We can't forget that the the Islamophobia media, etc., the politicians, we do that work, but we also got to look at the wider community as well, where they're not privileged enough, for example, to have a roof over their head, or they don't have anybody around them, or they're living in refugee squalid camps where they don't have access to the stuff that we have. And that's where we can make a difference. For example, the Uyghur community that are living abroad, what China is trying to do is they're trying to get the countries to deport them back to China, so they could go into East Turkestan and get tried, etc., like why they've been to Turkey, etc., etc. That, and social media, that can play a big role, where there was a brother in Qatar who's about to be deported to China, but because there was a last minute social media campaign, alhamdulillah, based on that campaign on social
Alhamdulillah.
media, they managed, and all of us put together, we managed to stop the deportation, and they gave the brother to give him a choice of which country he could go. So he went to Turkey. So that's a third choice that he went to, as opposed to going to China. So that's one thing that we can make a difference on, on issues like this. For example, like petitioning our brother Sohail Hughes, who's locked up in India.
In India,
Yes, we can write to our MPs, local MPs, write to the UK Home Office. What I tend to notice these days is people don't want to be seen as being exposed. So when you do a campaign on social media, you get a lot of, and especially when there's pressures building up, a lot of these people actually do something. Whether they write something, they actually do something behind
Absolutely.
because they want to save face at the end of the day.
100%.
And at the end of the day, if we can manage to do that, then alhamdulillah, we achieve something that we can do. Especially, for example, the Uyghur community, for example, I believe that they've been let down
Majorly.
Throughout the whole world. But we can talk to our families, we can educate our families, read about certain areas, for example. I never knew who the Uyghur community was.
Same.
In 2014, until a brother contacted me, brother Abdul Ghani Thabit, and
Beautiful brother.
From there, I started reading myself, because I can't talk about a certain community if I don't know anything about them.
100%, bro.
And that's what I started doing. You gotta read, you gotta
Understand the history.
understand its history, whether
Yep.
it's Palestine, Kashmir, Rohingya. You gotta delve into these areas, and you gotta basically learn your topic. You gotta. If you don't, then you're not gonna go. You're always gonna fall short.
And there's not going to be a connection there either, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes.
For-
You gotta
for-
have a connection.
I mean, for example, if someone asks you and I, or if someone asks Muslims, how did Islam go into Asham? Khalid bin Walid, Amr bin As, under Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh, Salahuddin. We'll give the whole timeline. How did Islam go into Pakistan? Oh, Muhammad bin Qasim in Sindh. How did Islam reach certain regions of Bengal? Oh, Sheikh Shahjalar. So we know the history. And because we know the history, there is an immediate connection. Brothers and sisters, wallahi, do the same with the Uyghurs. Do the same, because there is a rich Islamic history in the area of East Turkestan.
Very rich.
A very rich one, yeah? So one of the ways in connecting with our brothers and sisters, with the Uyghurs is, and I always open my university lecture with this, that the reason why we know about the Palestinians and the Kashmiris and the Syrians, because we know about their history. Isn't it?
Absolutely.
We can name you the generals, we can name you the leaders, we can name you the Sahaba, yeah? But we need to do the same with the Uyghurs, so we feel one with their heritage. Because it's Islamic heritage.
Exactly.
What about those who are scared, Zahid? What about those who are scared? Scared to rock the boat?
If you're scared to rock the boat, you're always going to be in that limbo forever, unfortunately. And do you want to face Allah on the Day of Judgment? And when He asks you, what have you done? Obviously, according to your means and etc. What have you done? And your answer is, oh well, I had it in my heart, but I was scared. I mean, the answer is not kind of sufficient. It's if you're so scared, look, you're gonna die one day. You're gonna go to jail. You may go to jail, or you may die, etc., etc. But at least go with something that you have an answer to. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. If you don't, then there's really something wrong with you. And if you're always scared, and we're always like flinching at, this person saying so and so, or my non-Muslim colleague saying something, etc. And if you're always scared and you don't be confident in our deen, then it's going to transcend into your own children. It's going to pass on to their generation, from their generation. So we need to be proud of our deen, proud that we are Muslims, and proud of who we are and where we come from, and not shy away from that.
Absolutely.
That's the first step. And then from the next step is you educate, you learn the deen, etc. You get out, you go and meet new people, meet brothers, meet scholars, etc. And then third thing is you go and do something of what you want to do. Find an area that you want. For example, if your background is graphics, approach someone like ourselves or Five Pillars or Cage or whatever. Volunteer your services for them. Because many people are shy, they don't want to speak, etc. There's many avenues that they can take, which can fulfill, a duty that they can do.
Brothers and sisters, look, Jazakumullah khair, may Allah bless you for that advice, Zahid. I mean, and I'm just going to add to that. Look, brothers and sisters, myself, Zahid, others who are in the Muslim media scene and our respective organizations, we don't have armies at our disposal. We don't have the power to kick out diplomats and cut trade deals. But what we're essentially saying is that if an opportunity arises for you, or if you have the means to hold an event in your masjid, to hold an event at your university ISOC, to write a letter, to write an article, to contribute towards a video, to design an infographic, to sign a petition, to write a letter to your MP, Muslim or non-Muslim, holding them to account about what they should be doing. Whether or not they do something or not, that's something else. But the fact that you have written and reminded them of what they claim to be representing on your behalf, writing to the embassies of these governments, reminding Muslim governments via writing, via letters, by attending conferences, by reminding them that you have an Islamic duty to be doing X, Y, and Z. All of these are within our means. And realistically, in the comfort of our lives in the West, it's not asking for much. Well and truly, it's not asking for much. So please, if you're listening or watching this podcast, whether it be the Uyghurs, the Kashmiris, the Rohingya, our Muslim brothers and sisters in India, in Syria, in Central African Republic, in Somalia, and anywhere else that they're being oppressed. Please, when an opportunity arises, do whatever you can within your means. We are part of one ummah, and I'm going to conclude this podcast on the very well-known hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said the parable of the believers is that like one body. When one part of it aches, the rest of it responds in sleeplessness and fever. Just think about that analogy that the Prophet ﷺ used of a body. If I were to cut my hand, forget my hand, if I was to cut this little bit of my finger, would the rest of my body be normal? Zahid, would it be normal if I cut this much of my finger, bro?
No, it won't be.
We'd be in pain. We'd be in pain. We'd be in fever. We wouldn't be able to go to sleep without painkillers. The Prophet ﷺ used that analogy of the body because that's exactly what the Ummah of Muhammad ﷺ and the Ummah of Islam is. We are one body. And do not let fear overcome your mindset to act for the sake of Islam and Muslims. The fear of the punishment of Allah is the only fear that's praiseworthy. Yeah? The fear of creation, however, is something else. And also, we're not telling you either to forwardly put yourselves in danger and compromising situations. We're just saying that when opportunities arise and you have legal means to do what you can for the sake of the ummah who are being oppressed, please do it and exhaust it. And may Allah accept all our efforts. Ameen. Zahid, Jazakumullah khair for honoring us with your presence, bro. And I hope it's the...
to you for having me on.
No, barakallah feek. It was an absolute honor having you on, bro. And very rarely in podcasts do I have fanboy moments. Yeah, but you as an individual and your organization is someone who I admire and make dua for from afar, bro. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your efforts and your work. Bless you, your wife, your family, everyone who's involved in DOAM, your progeny. Ameen.
And likewise with you as well, bro.
Jazakumullah khair, Habib. Brothers and sisters, that's all for today. Please remember to subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel. For those of you who are listening or watching from North America, you can also tune into the Mad Mamluks channel. For those of you who don't like watching YouTube videos, you can go to all the podcast platforms and search the Mad Mamluks, where the Blood Brother podcast and all our episodes will be there. There should be a button on screen telling you to subscribe and stick on your bell notification. Inshallah, like this video, share this video, leave a comment, and until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Blood Brothers Podcast. 5 Pillars of Mad Monolith Production.